Once again, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May session of the Downtown Rochester Rapid Transit monthly webinar series that we hold. We've been doing this now for several months and been talking about several issues. And tonight we're going to focus in on station architecture, or more specifically, what will the stations, the platforms look like? And how they be placed in the corridor. We'll get a better understanding of that as well here tonight. So let me introduce myself. My name is Jared Hubbard. I am the project manager for Downtown Rapid Transit out of the Office of Administration for the City of Rochester. I'll be joined tonight by several individuals, but I'll take an opportunity to introduce Nathan Johnson from Formula Architects. He'll talk a little bit later, and Abdullah Yusuf of our co-design team. But let's cover some of the basics. We will be taking questions tonight. You can go ahead and submit your questions in one of two ways. The one, you could utilize the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, Zoom platform, and go ahead and type in your questions anytime you want to. We will take some opportunity through the time to either answer those questions via text response, or we will stop in the middle, roughly about halfway through the presentation, to conduct a live session of questions. We'll answer some of those then. During that live session, like I said, in the middle and then at the end, you can also raise your hand. And after you raise your hand and we recognize you to go ahead and speak, we'll be able to unmute your mic and ask your question live of the project team. So, and then as many of you saw, this webinar is being recorded and is placed on our project webpage. Every single one that we've had in the previous 5-6 months is on our webpage, rochestermn.gov/rapid transit for more information, to see those. And if you have any concerns during the session or need some problems with the Zoom platform, you can, I would introduce you to Alicia Valentin. She is with our consulting team, and you can see her email there below. She is running many of the things in the background and making us all look good through this process. So let's take a quick look at the agenda for today. We will start by going over a very brief overview of Downtown Rapid Transit. Once again, to remind everyone of just some of the basics information. Then we'll take a look at the prototypical design and what that looks like through the co-design process, and then we'll have a brief update on. And then we'll take a deeper dive into certain stations along the corridor, and you get to see how those stations fit into the surroundings around. And like I said, we'll conclude with a final last session of question and answers. So with that being said, let's dive on in and do the project overview. Downtown Rochester Rapid Transit is a 2.6-mile bus rapid transit, or BRT for short, system proposed for downtown Rochester. It will have 7 stations, 7 stops. It'd probably be another way of putting it. Some of those stops you'll be able to go both east and westbound along 2nd Street, and some of them will only have 1 stop. So we end up having 11 stations. During the peak morning and afternoon sessions, you can show up to a station and expect the bus to arrive roughly every 5 minutes. Outside of that peak and on the weekends, that would be roughly about 10 to 15 minutes that a bus would appear at that station. It will take roughly 15 minutes to get from one end of the system to the other, and we'll take a look at the map here in a second. We are expecting 11,000 passengers the day we open in the spring of 2025. And we are offering up expanded service hours that then are what traditionally is offered by Rochester Public Transit, or RPT. Our current capital cost is roughly $114 million to put the system in place, and we're looking at about a $2.8 million operating cost to operate the system. I will say that we are, go ahead to the map. Let's take a look at the map and I'll bring up what I was going to say. So here you can see the route. It starts with the West Transit Village on the west side of 2nd Street. That will be located at what is known as Mayo's current west parking lot. And then proceed eastwardly on 2nd Street through downtown, all the way to the Civic Center at 3rd Avenue. At 3rd Avenue, the bus will take a right-hand turn on the 3rd, followed by another right-hand turn on 4th Street in front of Government Center, and that's where you have your Government Center stop. Then it'll proceed with a right-hand turn on Broadway, and then eventually a left-hand turn back on the 2nd, headed back west out towards, back through downtown and back out towards the West Transit Village. The system is planned to use what are known as bus access and transit lanes, BAT for short. Those are essentially transit preferred lanes where they will take out the outside lane of most of the corridor with a few exceptions. We can talk about more of those if there's questions, but in most scenarios, for most of the corridor, we're looking at taking the outside lane of the corridor for those transit preferred lanes, so bus preference lanes. I say preference because you and your personal vehicle will still be able to make right-hand turns out of those lanes to side streets and to businesses and driveways. With that, we have the schedule. We are anticipating open up service in the spring of 2025. Most of the construction largely planned around with the stations that you'll see here today will be performed in 2024. We might start some early work in 2023. We hope to be, the project has submitted an application to the Federal Transit Administration, or the FTA, for 49% of the project cost. And we hope to receive funding for that in late 2022 to move forward with the project. Right now, we are in intensive design of the entire system. And that includes not only the stations, but it includes the roadway and some adjustments that we're making into the roadway. And then also it does include, as part of being as part of the federal process, it does include having to go through a formal environmental review as part of the project. And actually that will be next month's webinar. We'll be focusing on the environmental review. With that being said, I will gladly hand it off to Abdullahi Yusuf, who was one of our co-designers on the project, and I'll let him describe what that meant.
Thank you, Jared. My name is Abdullahi Yusuf, and I was a member of the co-design team. So the project initiated in the fall of 2020, and there was a call for applicants to join to provide community perspective. They chose about 10 diverse people to represent residents within a range of backgrounds, experiences, and to provide a collaborative process between Rochester staff, community members, and consultant designers and planners. They wanted to get the input of the community, which is very important when making a project this large. The goals of the project was to broaden the range of voices and the lived experiences of those who are using the system, based on design principles that were agreed upon, and to create a design that reflects the community and to get the people excited about it. In our next slide, we had three main perspectives that were expected of us. One of them was the community perspective. Another was how users experience the whole transit system and our distinct vision as a result thereof. From a community perspective, we wanted to highlight key community destinations. We wanted to get cultural guidance and to bring about shared values for Rochester residents. An example of those items would be, what should we do with historical landmarks? What can we do to preserve the area around the transit system? And how can we build it such that it is seamless? We wanted to develop a station based on design principles, and which we'll discuss later. The next topic would be how users experienced the transit system as a whole. We prioritized the design to be accessible for everyone. We wanted to solve the many issues people face in transportations currently, and we did not want to exclude anyone. Rather, we wanted to get the input of various people. We provided feedback on the transit amenities, concept designs, ranging from safety to comfort to accessibility. Our distinct vision was to promote an architectural system that is bold, that stands out, but at the same time preserves the historical heritage of the city. We wanted to become Rochester's first rapid transit line, and a lot of input is needed to make sure everyone is at least on board. We wanted to advocate for the significance of artistic expression. We wanted to make sure people who are amongst our community, local artists, were able to showcase their creativity. A part of being an artistic is such that when you go into the rapid transit system, you want to be able to feel comfortable. You want to look at items in the system that make you feel comfortable, that make you feel at home. And that's where we get our artistic expression. In our next slide, we discuss key design principles. So equity, we want to be able to provide something that is equitable for all people. We want people to have a fair system that's impartial and that everybody's treated fairly. Connectivity provides us ability and the capacity to connect platforms, systems, and applications. We want it to become seamless as possible. Accessibility is a very important aspect, and that is the quality of being able to use system with ease for everyone. Safety is a concern that was brought up by many members of the code design team, and we wanted to inform the city that that is something quite important. We looked at various aspects from security to lighting to access to safety staff. Comfort is something that brings physical ease and freedom from pain and constraint. It gives room for people to relax and enjoy themselves while they wait for the bus. Even though the goal is to have 5-minute intervals, we wanted to make it as comfortable as possible. Sustainability allows us to maintain a certain level of economic growth, but at the same time preserving the area and meeting standards that are green, and to build a project that is consistent with the times. Aesthetic identity allows us to bring the cultural alignment of different genres and social groups who come from various aspects of life and allow them to express it through their art, literature, and construction of various art pieces. On that note, I would like to pass it on to Nathan.
Thank you, Abdulluhai. It was great kind of working on the co-design process with you. I think we really enjoyed it, and I think we have a great outcome that's come out of it. So my name is Nathan Johnson. I'm an architect. I practice up here. My office is in St. Paul, Minnesota, but having the opportunity to work on Rochester is a great opportunity to work on kind of this unique and what's going to be a beautiful transit line that you're going to have implemented in 2025. One of the things we wanted to do is we established kind of the architectural ideas for the stations and the platforms was to really kind of benchmark it against other systems. So there's a lot of BRT systems throughout the country, and we wanted to identify what some of the best were in the nation. So we looked at a series of systems ranging from Vancouver to Chicago to Cleveland to the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul area, and looked at that in the context of making sure that what we built in Rochester was robust, and it was at a level at or above any of these other systems, some of the best systems across the nation. So that was our intent. So those are the 4 systems that we identify here, but we did look at a lot more, especially as we looked at specific content to include within the Rochester Rapid Transit line. You can go to the next slide, please. So what we did in regards to how do we want to set the Rochester Rapid Transit line apart, we decided early on that we wanted to have pretty large, extensive canopy that covered 80% of the platform. There's a snow melt system integrated in so that there shouldn't be a lot of snow accumulation on the platforms. It was very important as we worked through the design process that there were different environments and specifically heated environments that people could wait in comfortably as they waited for the bus. One of the primary concerns is making sure that the station and the platforms are accessible to all people, and that we're very open and available for anybody with and all abilities. We have multiple access points, and we provide tactile pavement, which really lets people know when they're getting close to an edge or the path that they may or that they should travel. And we also wanted to incorporate distinct architectural ideas that allowed the station to be a reflection of Rochester, both the individual communities, but also to provide a strong brand. So as you drive along 2nd Street, that you really know where the transit stations are. You can go to the next slide. So kind of some of the final elements that you'll see is that we have larger stations at the West Transit Village and the 2nd Avenue Government Center. We have an extensive canopy coverage. We're going to have what are called different seating types. So we'll have some benches, we'll have some leaning rails. One of the things that we think is going to be great for this transit line is we have some information screens. And we have information screens which convey information specifically about the transit experience. But at each station, we also have another screen that we anticipate will provide information about that local community. We also have a number of accessible features. We recognize that many people who are transit dependent or use a transit line frequently may have some issues in regards to mobility, and we wanted to make sure that we provided a station which really kind of considered that in our design. So we have a tactile boarding edge, we have accessible boarding area floor markers, which what that means is you can kind of see it in the photo on the left, where at each door to the bus, it's kind of identified in that case in a little bit different color, so you know exactly where to board the bus at. We have colorful wayfinding strips, we have tactile floor plans, and even we're proposing to have tactile maps so that you can, if you're visually impaired, that you can go up and you can touch a map and kind of see where you are along the alignment. You can go to the next slide. There are still some station features that we're working on and that are going to be determined as we kind of continue to work through this design process. What you'll see when I get into talking about the design of the actual station and the platform, we have a device called a booth. So we're still working on the extent of that booth or quantity of that booth and how they actually kind of work in the station platform. We're still working on the final materials that are going to be used in the design. You'll see fairly kind of gray or white content in a lot of images, but the colors of the platform are still up for consideration as we look at how they integrate into the local community. We are really advancing kind of lighting concepts, and the platform is going to be very well illuminated. So it will feel like a very safe environment. But one of the things that is on the table that we're working through the design and taking into consideration is dynamic lighting as well, that can give the station's unique character at night. And then we're also going to be working, I think there's going to be an artist call, which is going to be going out shortly, which is going to look at artistic enhancements that can be placed at any of the individual stations. And those can be incorporated into railings, into the station identification marker, wayfinding, windscreen panels, and even into the pavement of the platform are some opportunities for artistic integration that it can be functional, that will be integrated into the station. So from a user experience, we have some kind of early rendering that you can see here in regards to what we anticipate the station looking like. This is the approach side. So as you kind of come onto the platform, you can see that we're very concerned about keeping a pretty broad kind of open pathway that pedestrians can move along. You have a canopy above that covers the majority of the platform. We're saying 80%. You see that marker kind of in the foreground that will have content that users can see where they need to go, and then they have that digital screen, which can include when the next bus is arriving, but also additional transit information that you can see integrated into the marker there. And then the booths that are kind of marching along the platform on the right side of the screen there. You can go to the next image. And so what this does is it shows an image kind of immersed on the platform looking the opposite direction. One of the design features that is going to be very strong and that we're continuing to develop is this kind of wood canopy that is above your head, where we're going to use some regional wood to really build some warmth into the station, but also provide some visual interest that integrates lighting into it. You can also see the booths in the foreground as well in this image, and those tactile warning mats that tell you where the buses are. So those gray boxes that you kind of see on the right side of the platform, and that yellow strip. The yellow strip is what's called a warning strip, which says when you're getting to the edge. and those gray breaks are where we anticipate the doors for the bus being located. You can go to the next slide. So what you see here in front of you right now is the plan of the station. The station is actually 10 feet deep by 80 foot wide, built within the public right of way. The design of the bus rapid transit line, or the rapid transit line, is going to support what's called a 60-foot articulated bus. And what a 60-foot articulated bus allows is for boarding on 3 doors. I think the 40-foot bus that you may see in a lot of places in the city may only have boarding on 2 doors, but this bus has larger capacity and can accommodate 3-door boarding. And one of the things that's unique about a rapid transit line, and the way that this one is designed, is that you can board on all 3 doors because you will collect your fare before you get on the bus. So you'll see that you have ticket vending and validator locations where someone can pay before they get on the bus and just board. It speeds up the flow of this bus quite a bit, which allows you to get those fast times that go from 15 minutes from one end of the line to the other that Jared alluded to earlier. One of the features that we have on this, we talked about the desire to have this 4-sided enclosure. You see shelter on the right side of this plan graphic. So we have a 4-sided shelter, which is, well, not completely weather protected because it doesn't have hinged doors on it, but it will be a heated space that should be fairly comfortable in the winter months. In addition to that, you'll see that we have what are called booths. The booths are kind of a unique concept that's going to be specific to Rochester, where it's a more individual type of space that you can use by yourself, or let's say you have a small child. It gives you kind of a little bit more private space than being in a full shelter. The idea with the design of the platform is we're providing different types of environments that people can enjoy, and they can choose how they use the bus rapid transit line. Go to the next slide. So these are the preliminary concepts in regards to the material that we're going to use at the stations. And I'm just going to note some of the design features, which you can see on the right side, or the image on the right. And there's what we refer to as kind of the tall marker in this. It's about 25 feet tall as drawn. It's going to be an illuminated marker with information at the base. So where it says forward there, that's information at the base. It's just a digital screen, which is slightly interactive, where it won't necessarily be a touch screen, but the ability to like change information and provide information specific to transit. And then on the other side, which we can't see, it will provide information specific to kind of the community for pedestrians that are walking along the sidewalk behind. Some of the key materials that we're considering is in the canopy, where we recognize that Rochester does a great job of having high quality materials, and we want to integrate that into the station. So what we're proposing is what's called a copper tin cladding material on the canopy edges. And then on the soffit, we're looking at wood. And the 2 wood choices we've looked at preliminarily is ash, or what's called a thermally modified ash, and black locust. The intent of looking at those materials is those are regional materials that push kind of the sustainable story that we want to create in regards to this development of this transit line that Abdullahi kind of alluded to. On number 3, you see there's some dark concrete that will be a curb along the back edge of the platform. Number 4 and 5 show kind of some of the tactile devices that we'll be using on the pavement to really make this an extraordinarily accessible facility. And then lastly, you see gray concrete is going to be at the majority of the platform surface. You can go to the next slide. And so with that, I think we're going to open it up for any questions that you may have, and Jarrett will respond.
Thank you, Nathan. So this would be one of your opportunities to ask a question live. You could do that by utilizing the raise your hand feature on your bottom menu bar on the Zoom menu bar. And if you do that, we will recognize you and allow you to go ahead and ask your questions. We have Shane has raised their hand. Alicia, can you go ahead? Yep, Shane, you can now unmute yourself and be able to ask your question live.
Hi, hello, thank you. So I just had a few questions. One, I was curious if for the platforms, oops, sorry, that image is from an organization I'm involved with. But yes, okay, so one for the platforms, are they deep enough where 2 wheelchairs can pass one another? And then are you also assessing whether the areas leading up to the platforms are fully ADA compliant. Going a bit outside the scope of the specific construction area. Then my third question was if you have started identifying backup funding mechanisms, just in case something falls through. And that is all the questions I have for now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for those questions. Nathan, if you can start preparing your some of those answers, I'll turn it over to you here in a second, but I will say that most our standard platform length will be 10 foot deep by 80 feet wide. Some of those will be even deeper in our high boarding areas as stations. But I'll answer your last question there. Like I said, I'm with the city of Rochester, and the city elected officials combined with the Destination Medical Center, which will be supporting largely the local support of the local funding support for the project, have given me the direction at the current time that the project will not proceed forward without the Federal Transit Administration funds. So at this time, we are reliant on receiving those FTA funds to move the project forward. Nathan, I'll hand it off to you to go a little deeper.
Yep. So on the plan diagram that you saw on the previous slide, the minimum pinch points that we have is about 6 feet in front of any object. So it's a fair amount of movement. The majority of the platform is in the 8 to 9 foot range in regards to the amount of space that you have available for, as you kind of alluded to, having two wheelchairs pass. So yes, I do believe that can be accommodated. We intentionally made where the entry point is, so near the marker that you saw in the previous image, that is wider. We were experimenting with making it narrower or wider, and we thought it was really important for that access point to have a lot of ability for people to pass by in case like someone's standing at the screen. So I believe that is set at just over 8 feet wide. I think it's like 8.5 feet wide in the current sketches. So there's a fair amount of room at that location as well. And the shelter area, which we have what I refer to as an end shelter, that is a fairly deep space that's about 8 feet with interior in one direction. That's about 20 feet long. So there's a lot of room for mobility in there for people to move around, and limiting that with, I think right now we're showing one bench in there so we can accommodate passengers with limited mobility if they need to kind of park in that space as well. So yes, we are definitely looking at accommodating that. And even the boost concept, as we look at the design of the boost concept, we're going to be very conscious of the ADA. We're doing 2 kind of normal boosts and then 2 ADA boosts. So really giving some accommodations to that. And we'll be looking at that in more detail to make sure that works very well for anybody with limited mobility. Hopefully that answered your question. I know there's another part to it.
Thank you, Nathan. I see we just had a question written on into our queue box. So I'll give myself to try to read and talk at the same time here. I did want to add to that part of the co-design group that Abdullahi was part of really saw accessibility as a way to equity when it came to this project. And so we really have tried our best to identify accessibility features and be open and responsive to those. So if there's additional features or additional thoughts on that, like I said, we are committing to that. And so you can always reach out to me through the project channels, the phone number or the email. And we would love to take more suggestions and talk through some more of those accessibility features. So the question came on in was talking about one question about the height of the pylons or the markers, and then a question about planters on the end. Nathan, can you take a stab at trying to answer some of those?
Yeah. So 2 questions there, but I'll try to answer both. On the first question in regards to the 25-foot marker, we did a lot of work kind of benchmarking it across against other BRT systems across the country in regards to what's a good height for that identification marker, understanding that that's a significant piece of the brand. And so that's how we aligned at the 25-foot height. You will see when we get into the station specific images that we do have some shorter markers in locations where we see it more of like a historic location, and that architecture should be in the foreground as opposed to the architecture of the BRT stop. But yes, there's a recognition that it's tall, but it's really strengthening that brand and creating a strong identity for the rapid transit line was important as we began to do the development of that. We did also understand that a 15-foot or a 12-foot marker was a little bit short, or was challenged in regards to creating that visual connection to that location to really say this is where transit. On the second question in regards to landscaping, yes, each station area, and we're going to go through different station areas in a little bit after this Q&A process, you will see integration of landscape at a lot of those. It is very much constrained in regards to the public right-of-way that we have available, but I think at just about every one platform, and maybe there's one platform that I can think of on the entire alignment that doesn't have much landscaping, but all the rest do have landscaping integrated, whether it's behind the station, if there's enough room on the sidewalk, or at the end of the station, kind of down near the shelter, there's a lot of landscaping integrated there as well. Do you want me to take on, or there's a question about solar in there as well.
Go ahead, David.
So currently we do not have solar technology built into the station or capturing any solar energy. I guess that's something that can be considered from an evaluation stuff. I've looked at this on other transit lines, and when we've looked at it, the kind of payback and the value has kind of been limited in solar, where I think as a purchasing body, and this would be something for the city of Rochester to consider, you may get more bang for your buck purchasing solar power than you will kind of generating solar power at the stations. But I think that's the extent that we've kind of discussed it to date.
Yeah, I just to elaborate on that again, the co-designers talked pretty extensively about that. So it's on our radar. Here in a second, we'll take a look at the stations and how they're close to buildings, and we might have some difficulties with getting light to some of those platforms as well. So with that, Nathan, why don't you jump on in and start looking at some of our locations?
Sounds good. Next slide, please. So we're going to walk the alignment from west to east and kind of look at a few of the stations along that alignment. So in this, we're looking at the 19th Avenue station. Eastbound, there's an existing bus stop that's going to be taken over from the BRT line. And so you can kind of see that on the left image, and then you can see what the environment looks like for the westbound station on the right photo. Next slide, please. So what's unique about 19th, and this is the only station where this happens, you have an existing bike corridor that this is being supported with. So we wanted to make the right accommodations for the bike corridor in relationship to the station area. And you can kind of see that green kind of dashed or solid kind of fill in regards to where that bike corridor is located. What the station does then is it gets built in front of that bike corridor, and we create an island concept here with pedestrian access points. So the pedestrian access points at 2 locations across the bike corridor that you can see located. And then the pedestrian kind of that's indicated with the letter C is the walkway that you can see that runs along the back here. So this is kind of a unique condition that doesn't happen at other locations along the corridor. You can go ahead to the next one. So this image kind of shows the idea of what the station looks like in that context. So you can see the pedestrian way, the bike corridor, and then the platform, which kind of sits out there on that island, and then the street light semaphore indicated there as well. The thing about the marker, you can see that very much in the foreground, 25 foot tall. The idea is that marker is going to integrate some dynamic lighting, both on the end and at the top of it, in regards to the design. So those are some of the considerations that are there. You can go ahead to the next slide. The next station area that we're going to look at is St. Mary's, the St. Mary's area, St. Mary's Transit Center. And we're going to look at this in two different architecture types, because on one side we have a traditional station platform, and the other side is proposed on the north part of the street is what's going to be the transit center. And the transit center is going to take over Cafe Presto, which you see on the image on the left. And on the right side, not in front of St. Mary's Hospital, but slightly east of St. Mary's Hospital, there will be a transit platform. So this is the plan that you can see there. So the St. Mary's Transit Center is to the north. The intent of the St. Mary's Transit Center is it provides a vertical it provides you a vertical connection to a subway that will connect you directly into the St. Mary's Hospital. So there's an elevator and a stair on the north there, which supports the platform. And you'll see some imaging on this in a moment. But in addition to creating kind of that vertical circulation, we also create kind of a pocket park plaza space around that, which creates an amenity for this area of Rochester. And then a nice canopy, which comes over the platform. On the eastbound BRT platform, that is very much like the prototype that we saw in the preliminary images that I showed earlier. And so that's what that looks like. One thing I will comment on in regards to St. Mary's Transit Center is that we are providing accommodations for 2 kind of custom local stops that you see, both eastbound and westbound, to support the existing bus system that's already there. You can go to the next one. All right, so one thing that I will comment on that you see in this image is this is where one of the locations, because you have the historic St. Mary's Hospital, we didn't want to detract from that with the tall marker. So what we did is we put a shorter marker. I believe it's 15 feet tall or approximately 15 feet tall. In this image, it may be a little bit shorter than that, but it's definitely shorter than the 25-foot marker that we saw previously. And then you can kind of see how this station now integrates into the street with the bat lane in front of the platform, that red striping there, the far side kind of shelter area that's enclosed, and the booths and all the accommodations that we've previously talked to. And in the distance, you can see some preliminary ideas in regards to what the local bus stop will look like. You can go to the next image. And so this is just kind of looking the opposite direction in regards to the station. And you can see the local bus stop here in the foreground. And then in the distance, you can see the actual transit platform looking the opposite direction. You can go ahead. So because the transit center is kind of a very unique, different type of space, the way that this station is being designed and developed is definitely different than the other station areas. The idea being that you're creating this great public amenity for the community that you can kind of see developing there on the right with nice landscape space and the space that used to be Cafe Presto, and a very glassy open transit center kind of on the left, and the wonderful kind of canopy that kind of stretches over the street and provides some weather protection. You can go to the next image. So this is a plan of the transit center here. So you can see the elevator is kind of in the bottom and the left. The transit center is located to the west portion of the site. And then you get this plaza space that kind of wraps around it with trees and groves and seating and a lot of other things to support that transit experience. You can go to the next slide. And so this is an interior image which kind of describes that. So the kind of plaza space that you can see to the right outside of these windows, and that vertical circulation. So that's there, but you can go down and be in a tunnel that then connects to St. Mary's Hospital. Next, please. And so this is just looking back a little bit further. You can see the elevator in the foreground and that stair as well. One thing that you will see incorporated in this image is that you have kind of this nice green landscape outside of the building, but also providing some touches of it on the inside that you see kind of adjacent to the stairs there. You can go to the next one, please. So this is that public plaza in the back of the site that you can see, where it provides kind of exterior seating area, places to park your bike. Some scooter parking is also indicated there. And I don't know if we have the image, but there's an opportunity for some maybe like push cart vendors to kind of park inside this space and kind of create this as a really active space to be used by the public. Go ahead to the next one, please. So the next station area that we're going to look at is 6th Avenue. So on the left is you'll see the eastbound platform location, which has a kind of a parking lot behind it and a retaining wall. On the right is the westbound platform, which when we were in Rochester back in May 10th, I believe, that building looks substantially different than it does right now, where it looks like it's almost complete. So we don't have a rendering which shows that building in the background, but we do have a pretty good rendering of the Eastbound platform, which shows what that will look like. So if you want to go to the next image, I believe that's the plan. So this plan basically adapts the prototype station that we showed at the beginning into the 6th Avenue. You can see all the access points indicated there in B. So 3 access points at the platform. I believe there's a question in regards to landscaping. So on the northern platform, you can see quite a bit of landscaping that kind of extends past the station. And on both platforms, actually, there's also a little bit, there's a kind of a swath of landscaping because we have enough right of way to put that behind the platform as well. So there is some intention in regards to really creating great landscape environments beyond the platform area as well to support the station. You can go to the next one. So this image shows how we would integrate in the prototypical station at 6th Avenue. You can see the tall marker there, the station platform and the canopy, along with the sheltered area on the far side of the platform that provides that 4-sided enclosure for patrons to use while they wait for the bus. Next slide, please. So the 2nd Avenue station, this is in front of the Mayo campus. Both the Hilton building and the Mayo building are the 2 locations. On the left image, we're actually taking over a site of one of the existing transit center facilities, is going to end up becoming a BRT, and then that's going to be located further east along the block in a custom bus shelter, which is going to look very similar to what the existing transit center looks like now. And then the other one is just in the foreground of the image on the right side photo is where the station is going to be located. We can go to the next slide. One of the unique features of the station at 2nd Avenue is we recognize that there's high ridership here. So this is one of the custom stations, and what we did with that is we made the station deeper. So where the other stations were 10 feet deep, this one became 13 feet deep to accommodate greater ridership numbers and to provide additional sheltering. So where we had booths in the other station areas, we added additional sheltering areas at this location to support the transit ride. You can go to the next slide. So this shows the station as it would look like in front of the Hilton building. This is also another location where we have a shorter marker, recognizing that this is a historic area of the city of Rochester. You can also see kind of the little bit large, not as large as the end shelter, but some additional shelters along the platform to provide more waiting space for people at this location. Next slide, please. So this image, and we're still working on them, this begins to show what this could look like at night. The primary thing that we want to convey is that the station will be well illuminated beyond kind of anything around it. So you have a well-lit platform, you'll have well-lit waiting spaces, and it will be even more lit than kind of the street environment around it to provide that kind of level of safety. And we will be incorporating some unique lighting concepts in here, which I talked about previously with dynamic lighting at the marker and probably within some areas of the canopy and the station as well. Next slide, please. So this shows what the concept would look like in front of the Mayo building. So this is westbound on 2nd Street at 2nd Avenue. And so very much similar to the platform that we just saw, where it's a little bit deeper. It allows those 2 additional pods of waiting or shelter that the other stations don't necessarily have. Shorter marker kind of in the foreground, not to detract from some of the historic properties in this area. Next slide is going to be another nighttime image, which shows how this could look like in the evening. Preliminary image about saying we definitely want a volume of light and probably even more light than we're showing here. But these stations will even be really well lit up for users. Next slide, please. All right, so the Civic Center station, this is kind of near the library and the Civic Center and supports kind of that river walk, tying into that location that you can see on the right is where it will be located. Actually, in both locations, the right side is essentially the right photo is essentially where the station is going to be located. You can go ahead to the next station. So you can see the plan view here. We're adapting the prototypical station to this location along the Zumbro River. It ties into the plaza, and that plaza provides you access down into that river walk space. You can go ahead to the next slide. And so this shows the three-dimensional concept. So that tall marker, 25 feet high, the far side shelter, which is about 8 by 20 feet approximately, and then kind of the booths, which kind of march along the platform. And the last station that we're going to look at is the government center station. And this is what the environment looks like right now. There's actually, what's going to be interesting that you'll see in the imaging and the plan is there are going to be some significant improvements to the street area that you didn't see in some of the other areas. You can go on to the next slide. So to kind of enhance pedestrian safety, a median is being added at 4th Street here to provide some kind of resting space as you cross the street. There's only one platform, and I forgot to mention that at the Civic Center site, and I know Jarrett alluded to this earlier when he was talking, is there are actually 3 stations if we include the West Transit Village, which we didn't have any imaging of today, but 3 stations only have 1 platform. And so that's Civic Center, Government Center, and then the West Transit Village. And the reason for that is that's both the Civic Center and the Government Center are supporting a loop. So this kind of loops back on itself and then kind of continues back along 2nd Street. So you can kind of see where that's going to be located adjacent to the Government Center. It's the prototypical station. We're able to put at this location as well. You want to go to the next image? And so this shows how the station concept would integrate at the Government Center, a nice tall marker with the canopy and the far side sheltered area with multiple access points available around. And then you can see the median in the foreground as well. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Jarrett to kind of bring us to a conclusion.
Thank you, Nathan. So just in summary, we took a look at the project overview, how public art might be integrated into this project, and I'll talk about that again in a second here, and what our typical station design is, and how it will work into several of the surrounding environments that of our 7 stations. Like I said in a second ago, we are continuing to look at this work continues. It's not over. Alicia, you can go to the next slide. We are continuing to look at the concept of the booths. And once again, that's something Nathan and the rest of the design team are interested in hearing some comments on. We're looking to finalize what materials might be used. The colors at the stations, a little special note on this one is that most bus rapid transit systems around the country have a unique and specialized branding that is different than the rest of their transit systems. And currently the city of Rochester is going through a process to create a unique and special brand for downtown Rochester Rapid Transit. And so once that process comes to conclusion here in the next couple months, colors will be coming out of that recommendation, and some of those colors will be adapted into the images that you've seen here tonight. You've heard Nathan talk about lighting enhancements, and we're looking at additional ways to do that. And then finally, again, like I said, the art, we are looking at incorporating artists, local and statewide artists in involvement in such as things as the railings, as you can see here in the picture, the station identification or wayfinding, that pylon marker, that 25-foot tall marker that Nathan talked about, the windscreens or the shelter panels, and as well as the platform pavement. With that, we are kind of done with our conclusion of a material to present. So here's your opportunity to ask more questions. Once again, you can go ahead and use the raise your hand feature to ask a question live of us, or you can go ahead and type a question in the Q&A box, and we'll gladly try to get that answered here verbally. I do see one hand raised. It is Andy. Alicia, can you go ahead? Andy, if you can unmute yourself, you'll be able to ask your question.
All right. Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Andy. Go ahead.
All right. Well, there's a lot to absorb, but I think Nathan did a great job. Just so much to absorb and so many great things. I have one question as it relates to the 19th Avenue station westbound. It's always, I know you're working within the right of way. In that case, in front of Tyrol, there's a asphalt parking lot that just abuts that sidewalk. And I wonder if, I know you can't go into the private property, but is there a way maybe to incorporate some kind of low railing or fence or something, so your public sidewalk isn't just butted right up to the asphalt of the parking lot? That was just something that kind of jumped out at me. And I'm assuming too, like with some of the other bus stations, on Eastbound 19th and then one downtown, that you're gonna maybe try to salvage some of the materials from those some of those bus shelters, are the small ones are movable, I suppose, but hopefully some of that limestone and some of those materials can be salvaged as well.
Yeah, I think it's a good suggestion there at 19th. Nathan, you have any thoughts or comments on the station that we're going to be moving?
And we haven't discussed it, but I think it'd be a great idea, especially limestone. I mean, it's a very expensive material to kind of salvage that. And I know here in the city of St. Paul, they have a whole salvage yard of kind of existing materials that they've kind of taken from the city, and thinking about how we could repurpose that or reuse it as we kind of tell our sustainable story. I think it's a very good idea.
All right. Shane has raised his hand again. Alicia, can you go ahead? Yep, Shane, go ahead.
Thank you. This was a fabulous presentation, and I'm really excited to see this project moving forward. I just have 3 quick things. One, I was curious if there's been consideration for late night services that might run as late as 2:30 in the morning, maybe just on the weekends, but also in general, because I was thinking of 2nd and 3rd shift workers, as well as for entertainment and tourism purposes. Then my second point was regarding the booths at the stations, the glass booths. I just want to point out that those might get a little warm in the summer, well, really warm in the summer. And then the third one was, I just want to emphasize the use of universal symbols for wayfinding for folks that are, traveling internationally. My name's Shane. That's all I had to say. Thanks again. Great job.
Thank you, Shane. I'm trying to remember the 3 questions again. So there was the wayfinding in general that we are going to be utilizing as much as we can, universal symbols. With other 2 questions, help me out, Nathan.
Heat.
Oh,
Heat.
Heat. Yeah.
Heat. Yep. That's a good thing to think about. And then what was the first question?
I don't remember the first question. I do remember. So the question was about the booths, and yes, and I mean a glass box, it could get a little bit warm depending on how we do them, if there's any tinting. I think our intent, though, as we design the platform, we talked a lot about this with Abdullah and the co-designers, is providing just different environments, because the city of Rochester, like a lot of Minnesota, is a 4-season environment. So we want to provide heated spaces. We want to provide spaces for people to be cool, places for people to get sunlight. So I think even as we kind of get into the details, we talked about the booths in the context of ridership. And so there may be some opportunities to have more booths in one location than another, just because of ridership demand. And he did post the last question in there about the.
Yes, thank you, Shane, for doing that. We really appreciate that. So the question again was late night service, particularly on weekends, and thinking of the 2nd and 3rd shift workers. We, the city of Rochester and our RPT are working closely with Mayo to talk through when their shifts get on off and that type of thing. Nick, I see you came off of came on the camera. I'll introduce Nick Lemmer from communications with Rochester Public Transit if he has any further thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, I think it would be a great thing, Shane, if we had the type of tourism and entertainment district in downtown where there would be a demand to have this bus service open that late. I think it would be a sign of success that the service was so popular that people were asking to extend it. And I think if the ridership was there, we would most certainly be willing to do that. You may be interested to know that RPT is undergoing a 5-year transit development plan process. And as a part of that process, of course, we take a look at a lot of different things, including the span of service. So we're going to be asking ourselves just those very questions. What is the right span of service, not only for this rapid transit project, but for the entire system? So those things are being considered carefully. So thanks for that great question.
See, we have a couple more hands up. I'm going to go to Barry to go ahead and recognize him and ask Barry, you're ready to go on and mute yourself.
Yeah. Yes, I didn't ask this question. I was actually on in the earlier session, but I have another question now. Do you, what is the, assuming you do have fares and you don't go into the no fare option, do you have reduced fares for seniors and for young people, or like what exactly would the fare be, and what would the fare structure likely be like, or even a range of fares? Like what approximately would the ranges be?
Yeah, I'll simply say that we are looking at all those options on the table, and I know many of them are already offered by Rochester Public Transit. Nick, any further?
Yeah, so currently seniors and students get a 50% discount. Fare is $1 instead of $2, and that also goes for persons with disabilities. I mean, it's expected that the rapid transit service would fall in line to the rest of our service in terms of fare, if fares are to be charged. The only other consideration is, again, I'll mention the 5-year TDP. You know, we haven't raised fares in decades, so I think that's going to be taken a look at here during the next 5-year planning period.
All right. Well, with that, we're closing in on 6 o'clock. I'll start my thank yous and start preparing to end the session. So let me first say, as I said previous, as we started today's session, we are committed to doing these webinars once a month to present topics and suggestions on the project. Our next session is scheduled for Tuesday, June 29th. Once again, a noon and 5 o'clock session. The focus of that session, once again, will be the environmental process and some of our early findings through that process that is required with the federal funds. On the website, we do have what's known as a wiki map. That is a map that you go ahead and pull on up, and you can type and submit questions and comments on that map. And we go on there occasionally and we look and it helps guide some of our thoughts on the project, particularly as we connect to the areas and neighborhoods around 2nd Street as we move along with the project. Speaking of getting information and input to us, you can anytime, anywhere, you can always head to the website where this posting of this webcast will be posted. It's rochestermn.gov/rapid transit. mm.gov/rapid transit. The email account to send us an email anytime is just rapidtransit@rochestermn.gov with our phone number at 507-328-2025. That's once again 507-328-2025. I want to take a second here to see if any more questions come on in and say my thanks. First, thank you for Nathan and your work and your time to put this presentation together. Thank you very much. And a big thank you to Abdullahi and Yusuf and the rest of the co-design team for spending the last 10 months with the design team and walking through this process and being very vital to giving us input and presenting the designs you see today. So thank you, Abdullahi, and thank you for attending today and presenting. We really, really appreciate all your work that you've done with that. With that, I do see Barry's hand. You're still up. Barry, your hand is still up. Do you have a quick question before we close tonight?
Yes, I'm wondering if there would also be transferability between the rapid transit and the regular buses, like for free, assuming you do fares back and forth.
Yes, we are looking at that, and I think that's part of that transportation development plan that Nick has mentioned a couple times in the last few minutes, that we're looking at that 5-year transportation plan that'll be getting kicked off here very shortly. And so fares will be fares and connections and how that works with the rapid transit altogether will be a part of that document. So once again, thank you everyone for participating tonight and tuning on in. As always, phone number 328-2025 or rapidtransit@rochestermm.gov. Always interested in your comments and your input. Thank you. Have a good night. Appreciate you all.